What's happening, guys? Welcome back to another Sunday Scan. I hope that everyone had a great week and that you're all enjoying your Easter weekend with your families. It's nice to be back on Scan. Last week I was out, and so Stan covered for me. He did a great job, covering all the market thoughts and then a bunch of main watches that ended up playing out really nicely. So big thank you to Stan for that. And I'll tell you what, it's really nice to be able to trade with people during this kind of market cycle where you have people and investors underground of all different styles, and when volatility really spikes, it's nice to have people who have their specialties all kind of working together to paint a picture of the market and to be able to really focus in and provide a little bit more context on things. So you have people who are doing swing trading, some people are intraday, and just everyone is kind of sharing their thoughts in real time, and it helps to make sense of a lot of this action. So Investors Underground is running a volatility sale at the moment. So if anyone has been on the sidelines, if anyone's a newer trader, if anyone's struggling in this market, I would highly encourage you to check it out. People are always saying, maybe I'll wait a little bit longer, maybe I'll see, but there's a cost to waiting, and there's a cost to not doing things. And we call it market tuition, or basically people trying to figure out everything on their own and going through these cycles and going through these periods where it's just an intense market. And if you don't have strategies for it, it can be an expensive and a frustrating time, as opposed to trying something where you have more experienced people who have been through these cycles all working together. And on top of that, you have all of the news headlines, you have all the technology to go along with it. So if anyone's been on the fence, literally no better time to get into IU than right now. And you can trade with all of us. And so I encourage you to check out the link in the description here, and we will get right into Scan. So a couple things I want to go over this week. I'm going to run through some general market thoughts, kind of where we're at in the cycle, what's driving the market. And then a little bit later on, I'm going to go through just a bunch of, kind of main watches, but also kind of just general market thoughts on those names. Because when you have a market where, things can be up or down, multiple percent in the general markets day by day, I think it's just good to have names that are on your watch list that you're prepared for in the event of, if this happens, then I have go-to. So whether that's earnings plays, whether that's China headline trades, or anything else, I think that it's just good to have a wide range of names that you're watching. You kind of understand what's driving them, and then you can make very quick decisions as things come up in real time. Because even with the watch list and everything that we've been doing, we put out general names that we're watching and things that we have a plan for if a certain circumstance happens. But a lot of times during the day, something will come up, a headline will break, and then you kind of have to reshuffle your plan. And that's fine as long as you have kind of go-to names for that, because that can cut down on a lot of the time that it takes to really, come up with a thesis, a plan, an entry, an exit, and everything in real time, as opposed to having those things mapped out a little bit in advance. So I'll just give you the disclaimer now that I'm not a financial advisor, and these are not buy or sell recommendations. Everything I'm about to talk about is for informational and educational purposes only. And so now I'm going to run through just a bunch of charts, and we'll just kind of get going with the scan for today. So the first name that I really just want to touch on is SPY. So obviously we've had a ton of volatility over the last couple of months. The main driver has been tariffs, and especially between the US and China, those trade tensions have been the main driver, much more than all the other countries. So, if you look at like a pie chart of who the US actually trades with, the China share is a big piece of that pie, and you have a couple of countries that are big pieces, but a lot of the other countries, they're much smaller pieces. And so you might have some deal flow coming out over the next, couple of days or couple of weeks of maybe this country, signs a deal, maybe this country signs a deal. But unless it's one of those big pieces of the pie that really moves the needle, I think that's what the market is waiting for. And so, especially with China, that's going to be the main driver for anything trade related and anything headline related. And, you can see, we always talk about money's constantly flowing somewhere. It's either flowing into equities, it can be flowing into commodities, it can be flowing into bonds, it can be flowing into, other currencies. And so one thing that I want to touch on is gold. And so GLD, or gold, which is a proxy for, the commodity of gold, this has been on a tear. And I'd just like to talk about a little bit about why gold acts like this during these very uncertain times. And it might, give a little bit of clarity to some people who are like, okay, why does gold actually function the way that it does? So basically, the long story, condensed down, is that gold, as an element on the periodic table, has always been the best suited element on the periodic table to serve as a kind of like a natural money source. And so throughout human history, gold has been kind of the unallegiant money that no particular country controls, but it's more just the best natural element to serve that role. So keeping that in mind, if you look at the world, kind of economy and the countries and all the trade stuff going on right now, if you have all these different countries with their own currencies, fighting it out and everything, a lot of times people want a neutral, unallegiant currency that has served as a natural currency to kind of serve as a safe haven during those times. And so a lot of times when there's turmoil between major countries and major currencies, that's why you have people flock into gold. And so just a little bit of context for why the run up with that, because I feel like, we hear a lot about gold, but not a whole lot of people, dig into kind of the history of it, why it serves that purpose. And, because I came from a natural resource background, I used to be mostly a commodities focused or natural resource focused trader. I have a little bit of that context with it. So, all different types of things have been used as currencies throughout time, even things like salt, like seashells. Actually, with salt, that's where the term salary comes from Saul. And so just an interesting kind of data point there, that the reason why gold serves as an unallegiant currency is because it's the best element on the periodic table throughout human history to serve as that neutral currency. And so that's why when big countries are fighting, people tend to flock into gold. And then what are the knock-on effects of that? So a lot of times you'll have the gold companies eventually, start to make runs with that move as well. So with gold, you have producers, you have streaming companies, you have developers, you have explorers, and so a lot of times when you have big gold moves, you'll have the other companies in that gold space, kind of get anchored to that in some way. And so things like NEM or SAND, you can see the moves associated with the gold producers or with the streamers, WPM, Wheat and Precious Metals. So a lot of these companies are kind of trending with it. So it's just something to keep in mind that while gold is running, while all these trade tensions are going on, it's good to have it on your screen and to have this sector up. But if you have a lot of trade kind of tensions get resolved, or if a deal gets made, you can have a huge mean reversion trade in that. And so, that can be on watch for either continuation or mean reversion, really depending on the headline. So gold is just something I want to spend a little bit of time talking about. Another move that we saw over the last week was this HTZ. So Hertz, Bill Ackman announced a position in the company, and it was a breaking news trade, and it just went crazy. So I think Ackman or his company Pershing Square announced a 20% position in Hertz, and that came out in the afternoon. And I just wanted to talk a little bit about what a breaking news trade really looks like in this market, and how if you have good headlines, good speed, and you have a strategy for it, you can really capitalize it on the long side. And then maybe if you're looking for a turn, then you can capitalize it on the short side as well, whether that's a quick pullback or whether that's a real trend change. So if you look at HTZ, a lot of times with breaking news trades, if you have them on your radar, especially when they've been forming bases, it's good to just have lines around those areas that are like the equilibrium price. So if it's been trading in a channel for a while and you have a breaking piece of news and you see it start to break out, but then also start to base above that channel, that can be a nice risk area to use. That as long as it kind of flips from this is being resistance to now this is being support, and you have a big catalyst, you can usually have a relatively tight stop, but also capitalize on a huge move if you have a proper sizing and everything like that. So that's a good example of the first leg of kind of a breaking news trade. And then you can see after it has that blow off kind of top, you usually have a sit back. And Nate always had a great quote saying that probably 98 or 99% of stocks that have major run-ups, they almost all sit back at some point. That doesn't mean it's a trend change. It means that you get into a situation where, let's say you had shorts blown out, you had all this new demand come in and everything, you'll get pockets where it will sit back because the buying exhaustion is basically, finished, or it's peaked for that moment. And that is usually a good point to look for, when you have these big sitbacks, even if the trade is still in play, even if the trend is still holding. That's just something to keep in mind. So, drawing those lines, equilibrium points, and then you have a breaking news trade, you can usually use one of those edges of that range as kind of a risk point as it's working and breaking out. Maybe it takes you one or two attempts to do it, but those can have a lot of range with great reward to risk if you can nail them. And then looking for those, blow off moves, and then that sit back where you have those pockets where it's just trying to, consolidate, catch its breath. New people are, entering, new people are exiting, and then you kind of have a trend form from there. So into next week, HTZ will be on watch. You can see these key levels around, 770 or so, where it's forming that base, and maybe you have a failed follow through where it just breaks down, and that support flips to resistance, and that could be a real trend change. But otherwise, you could just have it base here and then possibly grind up for its next move. Another stock I want to talk about was Netflix. So another thing driving this market right now is earnings season, especially in big names. And so names like Netflix, they're not super impacted by some of the trade headlines. And so that can be an attractive proposition for a hedge fund manager, or for someone if a stock is, a major equity, if someone wants some equity exposure and they want something that's not super correlated to all these crazy trade headlines, then, Netflix could be, that safe haven. So we talk about in bear markets or during market corrections, the first thing that happens is that money tends to leave equities, people de-risk. And then after that initial kind of de-risking, then they're looking for pockets. And then on the opposite side of that, you have something like UNH, where you've had, a major gap down on earnings. And so it's the same thing. Earnings season is a catalyst. And now what companies are doing well, whether it's due to trade headlines or other things, and what companies are not doing well. And so in the case of UNH, it's really more about they had a big run up kind of leading into earnings. And part of that is because usually healthcare is seen as more stable. And so like during trade headlines, you get that premium built up that, okay, US health companies, they tend to be a little bit more stable. You can get that stable cash flow. But then if on earnings, they basically tear apart that thesis, then you have that huge premium that it had for a while, basically all come out of it. And so that's just a good thing to pay attention to, that, if you have stocks that are running up on a certain theme and then earnings disproves that, you can have, major retraces back to where they came from pretty much. And so Netflix will be on watch for continuation higher into next week. And UNH, it's not so much on watch, but it's just more of an example of what can happen when you have a thesis go, wrong. Tesla is another name that has earnings coming up over this next week. And you can see, big run up into the election, big fade back down, and now you're just kind of consolidating at the base. And so I think what you could see happen is, I don't have a lean for which way earnings are going to go. Obviously, it's been a lot of turmoil in Tesla since Elon has been involved in some of the government things. But I think if you do have a major negative catalyst on Tesla, or if Tesla gaps down, I think that you'll have Elon pretty much step back from some of the government activities. That's not necessarily a trade thesis, but I think it's just, the stock has suffered a lot. And I think that if you get a gap down in earnings, or if you get something pretty negative, I think Elon will kind of be forced to step back and deal with that. But at the same time, if earnings are decent, or it just kind of stays here, I expect them to kind of stay into the government role. And then if we have a deal announced with China where some kind of positive catalyst happens, and you have positive earnings, earnings surprise, maybe you even get a move back up to past 300. If the things that were dragging it down are no longer dragging it down. So you kind of the government stuff, the China deal, and earnings, those are the things that are driving Tesla at the moment, in my opinion. Google, another name that reports earnings this week. And I think that this has been an interesting name to watch. It's been hit pretty hard. A lot of the thesis that Google has had with being dominant in the search space, that's now being questioned by like the advent of a lot of the AI powered searches, and they're replacing a lot of the Google functions that it traditionally had. And then you also have some monopoly concerns with Google that people are talking about possibly doing a breakup of it, or spinning out maybe YouTube, or spinning out certain aspects of its business. So I think that earnings are going to be a key time for Google. And, I don't really have a super strong lean which way it will go, but I think it could have a significant move. Again, it's either proving a thesis or disproving a thesis. So let's say, worst case scenario, Google says, we don't know how the market's going to be. We're going to cut back on CapEx. We are losing a little bit of momentum in some of our segments due to AI. That could be kind of worst case scenario. Maybe you get flushed down to that 130 area. And then if you have, positive headlines where it's like, we're actually still growing, we don't expect, any tariff stuff to really impact our business, and things are going well, then you could have a big move up. So it's more just being prepared for, if you have a thesis proven or disproven, you can have major moves coming off of that. And if the FANG names are driving the market, then earnings or anything major that can drive those is something worth paying attention to. Boeing and defense names, they also have earnings this upcoming week. So BA, LMT, RTX, all these different names, they got hammered a lot when the new administration came in. They were talking about government spending, and they were talking about cutting defense spending and all that. But now you've seen a little bit of a turn of events where that seems to be a sector that might start to get some momentum build back up in it. And so I think these are worth watching as well for around earnings. Boeing has a special situation because a lot of their planes and business comes from overseas, and so if you have tariff or trade concerns, that can definitely impact Boeing a lot. And so that might be a bellwether for the sector. But Boeing's a little bit more unique than something like LMT or even RTX. Another name and kind of sector to watch is the rare earths or rare minerals. And so, a couple of weeks ago or a week ago, China said that they're not going to be shipping or basically supplying the U.S. with as many rare earths as they used to. And because China has a big, majority of the rare earth production in the world, then a lot of these U.S. companies that are involved with it, whether it's UUUU or MP, or there's a bunch of these other names. And I encourage everyone to kind of just look up, what are the top 10 rare earth companies. You can use AI for some of these functions now. So what are the 5 or 10 most popular rare earth stocks? And you'll see that, you can have these new trends or sectors form, kind of like what we saw with the quantum names a while ago. You can have that exact same thing happen just with a new narrative, a new sector. Money comes flowing in. You have some kind of a theme for it. Retail gets interested. The companies start doing press releases. And it's kind of a very repeatable thing. So the rare earth space could be a theme that is continuing to form, kind of like the quantum names. So that's something that is worth having on radar, in my opinion. BABA, PDD. So these are the Chinese names. They will be extremely sensitive to any China headlines. Remember, these have been hit pretty hard, and we've had, I think, some pretty good reads on these as time has gone on. But the thing with the China names is that, again, they trade on assumptions. A lot of stocks trade on assumptions. So if the assumption has been, major issues with China, possible delistings, everything like that, that's all the assumption. And that premium or that lack of premium kind of gets built into the stock as it flushes. And so these are good to have on radar. If there is a China headline, all of that can get, disproven. And so if you have some kind of positive Chinese headline, like maybe they both pause the tariffs or maybe they do something, that basically will set a baseline. And you can assume that if that baseline is in place, if they're starting to come to some kind of resolution, then they're most likely not going to delist. They're most likely not going to, do these other things. And so all that premium that was, built in on the negative side can come off, and you can have these giant squeezes in the Chinese names if you have a deal announced. But otherwise, I think they'll consider or continue to just kind of putter out and stall in the mid-range. But again, it's about proving or disproving a thesis or an assumption, and that premium built into that assumption as well. And the same thing really goes for China and Apple. So obviously, Apple is a major player in China, and there's been all the reports of the iPhone prices possibly spiking and all that stuff. Again, these are early days with the trade talks. All this has only been going on for the last month or so. And so I think that, again, you have a huge amount of air that came out of Apple, supply chain issues and everything like that. But it's only one headline away from, this didn't actually impact the business if there was a resolution. So I have no idea if there will be a China headline or if there will be a resolution, but I do know that I have names that are go-tos in case that does happen. And Apple is one of those. And just a couple other general names. So Palantir has held up pretty well. They got some more contracts flowing into them. They had some stuff with NATO, using some of their software. And so Palantir has actually held up a bit better than I would have thought it would. It's a retail crowded name, but as long as, people are still supporting it, and as long as, you have some positive news and it's reacting to that, this has been, obviously choppy. It's had a huge amount of range. It's a great day trading stock for a lot of people. I know, like Nkaz and Nick, he trades this one a ton, and so does Nate and several other people. So it's good to have on radar. But I think just kind of bigger picture, it's actually held up fairly well, given the potential of what some of these other stocks in themes have done. Like if you look like an OKLO or something like that, you can see these names, down from 60 to 24 or 23. That's a major unwind. And if you compare that with, how Palantir, some of these other names have done, 130 at the blow off top to now trading in the mid 90s, that's not as extreme. So that's something worth paying attention to. MSTR, crypto's actually held up pretty well too, much better than I would have thought. And again, you could have part of the reason why like gold is doing well. Obviously, Bitcoin, it's a different version of kind of the gold. So like how gold has been the best natural element, Bitcoin has been trying to prove for the last 10 years or so if it can be that digital version of an on-allegiant currency. And it's much more speculative. There's much more leverage involved. So it's not necessarily a safe haven asset, but it could still get, some flows of that, as trade tensions are going on, Bitcoin could possibly, catch a bid from that. And there's also been something else between Trump and Powell, as they're not happy with Powell and not lowering interest rates. There's been talks of could they replace him legally? Usually, that has not been the case. But if somehow the administration is able to replace Powell or to even get that fear in there, I think that the market will price in, okay, if they're able to do that, they're going to throw in someone who can lower rates quickly. And if you have at least somewhat of a stable market and lowering rates, that can benefit speculative assets like Bitcoin that can serve that purpose of the on-allegiant currency. And then also, it tends to do well as the dollar is depreciating and some other macro things are happening. NVIDIA, I have to say NVIDIA looks pretty weak still. I understand that, this has been a fundamental, quote unquote, darling over the last year or two, but you just have to really pay attention to this earnings season to see if the large FANG names are increasing CapEx or if they're decreasing CapEx, because again, where is that, pie chart of revenue coming from NVIDIA? And you have like Google and Meta and all these things are like the big pieces of the pie. And so if they start cutting back on CapEx, NVIDIA is going to get slammed on that, probably more so than it already has. But if you have Google report earnings and some others, and they're saying, business is still fine, we're still increasing CapEx, and we're having a positive return on investment on that, then NVIDIA could catch a bid. So that's kind of like the earnings CapEx trade right there, in my opinion, NVIDIA, and it's worth paying attention to. Just a couple other names to keep on radar. This almost reminds me of a name that like Emil might have on watch. So a big base, starting to show some relative strength and looking to break out. So there was an insider buy on DLTR, and it could be because maybe they're the tariff stuff with all the other countries. Maybe Dollar Tree is able to source products from other countries besides China more easily now. So that could be a reason why it's starting to break out and show some strength in this market. And then we already talked about gold, so I won't get too much more into that. So those are really the names that I have on watch for this upcoming week. I know that it was a lot and it was a little bit of a different format, but I figured that it was just worth really, touching on that and going through, having baskets of these names, talking a little bit about the why they could be moving, and then just having plans for different scenarios. And again, being in a place like Investors Underground where you have all the breaking news headlines, like the AI scrapers catch everything the second it comes out, and then you're able to have experienced traders kind of interpret that news and kind of form a thesis, and then people can map out their own entries and their exits. But it's a great place for idea generation and to really just be able to navigate this market a little bit better than people trying to do it on their own. So again, we're running that volatility sale right now. I highly encourage you to check it out, because again, that market tuition concept of you can go through these cycles on your own. You can try to figure it all out on your own, but that is going to be way more costly than any kind of service would be, as long as you're getting good info and everything. So it's the choice is up to every single person. They can make it for themselves, but I know that I wouldn't want to be trading on my own without a community right now. And so IU is the place for me, and hopefully it will be the place for you if you decide to check it out. So those are the main things I want to touch on. We also have a new Trader's Journey episode out with Anthony and Goose. Goose is an alias, but he's been a great prop trader. He knows Lance Breitstein and everyone. So I would encourage everyone to check out that episode as well. So that's really all I have on my end. Quicker scan today, but I think we got through a lot of topics, and I hope that everyone can enjoy the rest of your Easter, and we'll see you all in the room in IU next week. Take care. Thank you everyone for watching. If you want to trade live alongside me and other members of the Investors Underground community, then check out investorsunderground.com to see if becoming a member is the right decision for you. They have some of the best technology and a lot of great members there, all looking to help other people improve their trading. And also check out Investors Underground content on YouTube and Twitter. Thank you.